I was actually raised in LaSalle and moved to Tisquoia when I got married, and was here for about 20 years. And actually it was in Tisquoia that I got the idea for a series of novels starring the protagonist Joe Sullivan in my book here. So I think the years spent as a child reading books, I used to read all the time instead of going outside and playing, and Mom used to read to me when I was a little kid, so I've always loved to read, and I always wanted to be a writer, and that formed my childhood. And it was always mysteries. I loved like the Bobbsey twin mysteries, and then Hardy Boys mysteries and things like that, so that's always been where my main interests lie. When I moved to Tisquoia, I actually started going to the Willow Springs Mennonite Church. And it was through Willow Springs that I first was introduced to the Englewood Mennonite Church in Chicago. Before then, I always thought of Chicago as a big, scary place kind of thing. And I didn't even like driving in Chicago, let alone think I would ever want to live there. It's like, it's just, there's too much stuff going on. But there was something about the people and the community of the Englewood Church when I was there with a work group that kind of energized me and brought an interest to me for the lives of people as they deal with the trials and tribulations of everything that's going on, and poverty and homelessness that's up there. And so that sparked a bit of interest in me about wanting to reach out beyond what I already knew in my community. And maybe, you know, maybe it was part of a midlife crisis too. That happens to some of us, and a little bit of combination of midlife crisis at the same time. I was introduced to this other life, basically, and a totally new world. That's why I ended up moving to Chicago, and that was in 1987. And while I was up there, my main reason for wanting to move up there was so that I could work with the homeless. There was an organization called the Night Ministry, which I was aware of, that worked with the homeless. Although actually my first experiences wasn't with the Night Ministry. It was almost like fate meant to be. The first couple of days I was there living in Schaumburg. I first moved to Schaumburg. There was a performing artist named Carolyn Green at a coffee house, and I went just because I'm in the city now, I can go see performing artists and stuff. And I missed the coffee house here because there wasn't, you know, I didn't know anybody up there. And Carolyn Green was talking about her husband who had started this Emmaus Ministries, which worked with homeless men who had gotten involved in prostitution in order to survive and to maybe to support their bad habits. And I talked to her about that, and it was actually her conversation and the organization that they had that got me interested in the book that I'm writing right now. The first time I ever volunteered was on the street with the Emmaus Ministries. I was a volunteer walking with the staff person and get to meet the men up close and personal. And then eventually, like maybe a few months later, I started going to the Night Ministry, which was associated with both adults and youth. And I was with them, I was in Chicago for about 4 years, 2 years in Schaumburg and 2 years in Wicker Park. I had to get into the city because the suburbs was just too, that was like not country and not city. If I'm going to be in the city, I got to be in the city. So right into Wicker Park, right into the city. However, in 2001, I ended up moving to Seattle. My sister lived out there, and her husband was in the Navy, and she kind of needed someone out there to be there with her when he was gone. And it was so beautiful out there, how could I not? One of the things that drew me to Seattle, however, was also the fact that there's a lot of opportunities for volunteering with homeless there as well. They have, because of the moderate weather, they maybe have even more homeless than you can find in Chicago. Maybe not, it's a bigger city in Chicago. There's a couple of different places. I first started volunteering there with Street Links, which was similar to what I was doing in Chicago. Night Ministry had a bus ministry, which would go to the different neighborhoods that had poor or homeless people. They had a nurse on board, and they had cookies and coffee, and just sitting around to chat, just being there for them. And they also had a youth shelter where youth could stay until they were trying to find transitional housing. Well, now in Seattle, this Street Links had a van that went to the different neighborhoods and served soup and coffee and soda to the kids on the street. So it seemed very similar to what I was doing in Chicago, and I really got involved in that. However, funding was cut for that. It was a Seattle Children's Home thing. Funding was cut, and I ended up not volunteering for a while until I got involved with Teen Feed, which is an organization that works with several churches in the Seattle area that open up their kitchens. And there's groups of people that come in. I think they do that over in LaSalle too. Groups of people come in and bring food, serve the youth, and I was one of the volunteers that would come, set up tables, grab a plate, and sit and eat with the youth. Basically just getting to know them one-on-one, which I really enjoy. That's the part of the volunteering that I enjoy the most, is the personal aspect of it, not the advocating or the issue-oriented things. It's just the, here's Jim, here's Sue, and getting to know them as individuals. Lately, I have been volunteering with an organization called New Horizons, which has started a new program where at their drop-in center, they're offering kids the opportunity to express themselves in writing. There's an organization called Pongo Publishing, which goes to a juvenile hall and the mental hospital, and they have groups of people that work one-on-one with kids to help them express their emotions in poetry. And then if the kids are willing, they actually publish these chapbooks to try to raise money for the organization. And the Pongo Publishing idea is being incorporated into other groups like this New Horizons. So on Tuesday nights I go there and I carry around a notepad and pen and try to see if anybody, come on, you want to write a poem, don't you? I'll help you, we'll do it together kind of thing. And while I was gone, I just found out they did their first open mic night. So they had 8 kids sitting around, and they all had something to read, and they got up and they read from their poetry, and I was like, so it's working. It's getting the kids to express themselves. So that's my personal background. You're probably kind of wondering how that has, what does that have to do with me being a published author here? The book that I've written is about a homeless girl who goes missing. Her name is Lexi, and because she's homeless, nobody really cares that she's missing or thinks much of it at any rate. They think she's just moved on, and that happens a lot with the homeless people. My main character, Joe Sullivan, is the only one that is willing to listen to her or to care about her. She met her once and was really struck by the girl's humanity and her plight, and is frustrated because of the fact that no one seems to care. And so she starts working with another youth on the street who is Lexi's friend to try to find out what happened to her. And they run into all kinds of very strange suspense things that are going on here. The book actually started way back in Tisquoia. I had the idea for Joe when I was living in Tisquoia, and actually wrote a whole other book with her in it. It didn't have homeless kids at that time because it was kind of before I evolved, but it was centered around childhood issues, because at the time my own life was going through turmoil, and I really think that fiction displays reality in a much better light in some cases than nonfiction does. And so while I don't write about my life, I do write about my life in my fiction. And that somehow evolved into wanting to work with the homeless. And so the idea for the novel came about while I was still in Tisquoia. However, when I got to Seattle, nothing really happened. I couldn't find a publisher. It went through, I don't know how many revisions. I don't know how many times it's been rewritten and edited and changed, and it was longer, and then it was way shorter, and then it was, I don't know. But maybe 3 years ago, I went to a class at the University of Washington, and I was going through one last rewrite. It was sort of like, okay, I'm going to redo this one last time. If nothing happens, get rid of it. I had to move on because it was like kind of like a roadblock I needed to get past. So I went to this workshop and did some editing, and we would read excerpts in the class. Didn't really do nothing really happened with that. I did come up with a full draft and was thinking about self-publishing because everybody's doing the self-publishing these days. So I was actually looking into self-publishing and self-published a couple of short stories that had already been in print magazines just to sort of experiment with, okay, what is this? How does this work and stuff. And, excuse me. What happened was, just about the time I was starting to format it, to upload it as a self-published book, one of the guys I knew from the class that I had taken was starting his own publishing company. So I said to Stasha, I said, well, congratulations, that's a great idea, I love that. And he was in the Seattle area also. And he said, by the way, whatever happened to that book you were working on in class? And I said, well, nothing, I don't know what to do with it. I'm thinking of just self-publishing it because I was already started on the next book. And I needed to stop thinking about this and move on to that. He said, well, would you mind if we took a look at it? Well, are you kidding? No, I don't mind if you take a look at it here. Look at it, look at it. And they liked it, and they made some editing suggestions, as editors always do. But I think what we have gotten together is the best version of the book, and if it isn't, I don't care. It's been out there long enough. It's time to let the baby go. So the reason, and as I said, the reason I chose fiction is because to me either is important for people have a misunderstanding of homelessness, and they look at people, they either don't see them or they look at them and they see something negative. They see somebody who's a drunk and an addict, and they don't see it as a human being kind of thing. And there's a lot of books out there, there's a lot of nonfiction books out there about homelessness that are very poignant and do have a place. But those books are only being read by people who already care about homelessness, who already have an awareness that they are people and want to know more about it and maybe want to know more about what to do. I wanted to speak to people who didn't have a clue, didn't care about homelessness. And I thought, okay, if I come up with a really great, interesting suspense novel, something that they're just so wrapped up in the story that that's all they're paying attention to, and then tell it in such a way that they're actually getting a real-life picture of what it's like to be homeless, especially homeless in Chicago, maybe I can make some people think differently. The people that normally wouldn't think at all, maybe they will look a little bit differently at the people on the corner. Now, I feel like maybe I have done that to a certain extent, because some of the reviews I've gotten, there have been people who specifically said, I just don't look at that person on the corner the same way anymore. And that's like the best review. I don't care if that's the mystery part of it, really. I'm glad that they say it's a page turner. But what really makes me happy is when they say something like that. So hopefully it works that way for a lot of people, and because it's not really that popular subject. It's dirty, it's gritty, there's foul language in it. I'm very realistic about what these kids will do to survive. I don't pull any punches, so if you're put off by any of those things, I don't recommend you read the book, but it is really the way the world is on the street.